Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Good job. We're going to try something here. We're going to talk some story to help us recognize and honor Herb. I'd like to welcome a panel of those who knew him well and are beneficiaries of his vision. And they're going to sit up here with me for a few minutes and talk some story about their relationship with Herb Kane and perhaps how their vision and Herb's vision will help carry them into the future. Peter Apo is a trustee for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. He's a past president of the Historic Hawaii Foundation and is a 30-year friend of Herb Kane. So please welcome Peter to the panel here, everybody. Peter. Billy Richards, Jr. is one of the original crew members on Hokulea sailing to Tahiti in 1975. He's been involved with Hawaii's voyaging community since 1975 and has served aboard the voyaging canoes of Hokulea, Hawaii Loa, Makali'i, and Hokualakai. He is the president of Ohana. Please welcome Billy Richards, Jr. Billy. And finally, Nainoa Thompson is the executive director of the Polynesian Voyaging Society and is well known as the first Hawaiian to practice the ancient Polynesian art of navigation since the 14th century. He's navigated two double-hull canoes, the Hokulea and Hawaii Loa, from Hawaii to other island nations in Polynesia, and has also made his way up and through the Northwest Passage as well. Please welcome Nainoa Thompson. Yeah. Okay, now it's talk story time, so everybody, we're going to get real comfortable over here. And I told Nainoa, no matter what I ask you, just say what you want. Just say what you want. But let's begin. We'll begin with Mr. Apo over here. Tell us a little bit about, how Herb Kane inspired you, Peter.
Herb Kane changed my life. I was raised, and some of you heard me say this, I was raised during a time when it was not cool to be a Hawaiian. Both of my parents they were native speakers. They never spoke it in the home. We're talking 40s, 50s, 60s. Because it was a time of assimilation. Hawaiians needed to assimilate. So I grew up here through my high school years, not really knowing what it meant to be a Hawaiian. I mean, I knew I was Hawaiian by koko, by blood. But culturally, I was a vagabond. So let me leave that thought with you for a second and then shift tracks. 1778, Captain Cook sails into Kealakekua Bay. What he finds is a vibrant culture that has its own religion, a very powerful natural resource management system, a feudal society, but a society that works, an economy that is based on subsistence, but it's all good, and quality of life is good. People can raise their families, live their culture, and they walk the land with pride and with dignity. From that point on, it was downhill. Until 1893, the Hawaiian flag is lowered at Iolani Palace. Hawaiians are in disarray. They've lost a lot of their land and basically their dignity and their honor. And that's what I was raised understanding. Anyone that tried to reach out to figure out what it was to be a Hawaiian, if you could think about it, there are two basic media representations of what we were about. One was the early sketches of European sketch artists that traveled with the European explorers like Captain Cook, who largely were there to simply quickly document sort of what they saw And so what emerged was a body of work that largely characterized Hawaiians in their sketches as cultural curiosities. And our ali'i, who subsequently visited Europe, were sort of paraded around as kind of like zoo animals. The other major thrust of how Hawaiians were characterized came with the rise of the visitor industry, where through our advertising, the global reach of our marketing characterized Hawaiians in a very romanticized, palm trees, hula girls sort of way. That's what I grew up with. I come home in 1975 after being gone for 20 years on the mainland, and I see a poster at the Honolulu airport of this 60-foot double-hull voyaging canoe, crab claw sails reaching to the sky, lehulu blowing in the wind, warriors on deck standing proud. And I say, wow, what is that? That was the beginning, that Herb Connie was the beginning of my renaissance as a Hawaiian. In 1975, 76, 77, 78, the Hokulea Project is launched through Herb Connie. And the other thing that was going on was the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana. It was the beginning of a renaissance. Oh, the other thing is in the late 1800s, or 1800s, I'm not sure exactly when, as some of you may know, 70% of the Hawaiian population died from disease because they were not immune to smallpox, chickenpox, the flu virus. So the cultural transmission of what Hawaiians were about was severely interrupted. So now, I don't know who I am, what I am. I see this poster. And then down through the years, as Herb's brush and pen began to go to work and started sketching Hawaiians in detail, he begins to form a time tunnel, a time machine that a Hawaiian could hop on and go back and see our reflection in the mirror. Who we were as a people, what we looked like, what we dressed like, cultural concepts, how we lived. And finally, we as Hawaiians began to understand that we had a lot to be proud of. And while voyaging is the one area of his work that is mostly celebrated, he did far more than engage in raising the voyaging spirit, which is a whole nother story in itself. Herb Connie rebuilt the nation. He rebuilt a cultural nation that allowed us to stand up, to be counted, to be proud, to be relevant to the growth of Hawaii. And I think that is a contribution that he made not only to Hawaiians, but to all Hawaii. And I'm really proud to be able to have called him my friend, to have known him, and to have shared down through the years his thoughts. He changed my life, and I'll be forever grateful to him for that.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Hokulea, as the foundation, has brought the other two men up here to do some incredible things, making history. So through that lens, Billy, let's begin with you. Hokulea, Herb Connie, your conversations with him, you know, some of those special moments that you cherish having Herb Connie in your life.
Well, first time I boarded Hokulea was in 1975, the summer of 1975 in Honolulu. And Herb, of course, being the skipper, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I was asked to come aboard. Herb had a mission in mind, and I've said it before that, you know, of the three founders of the Voyaging Society, Ben Finney and Tommy Holmes and Herb Kane, I truly believe that Herb understood the importance of Hokulea and its voyages and the voyaging canoe relative to Hawaiians, to the culture that he wanted to express. You know, I think, and I think he did that. So he brought to us a canoe, and the canoe was the beginning. Peter talks about how it's like with the canoe and Ko'olawe. Those two things, those two subject matter were actually, to me, being the catalyst of the Hawaiian movement, the Renaissance and things. And I think that everything that exists now relative to the culture, to the programs that are available to Hawaiians, whether it be charter schools, whether it is can actually express itself and be grateful for Hokulea. Because Hokulea, I think, was the beginning of it all. I think, you know, and her brought it to us. My first voyage on my first trip with Herb on the canoe, we had two people on board at the Clara Manis and Papa Moses. They were the only two people on board the canoe that spoke Hawaiian fluently. And as we went along the shoreline from Honanao up to Kauai High, they would talk to each other. And those of us who understood Hawaiian, the little bit that we knew, could pick up a little bit here and there, and things. But, you know, 30 years later, I get asked to skipper Hokualakai, which is a canoe that belongs to Ahupunanaleo. And all of the crew are native speakers. And things. So we went from two kupuna who spoke Hawaiian, and the rest of us didn't, to a whole canoe that does. And things, you know. So it's a gift that we as Hawaiian people should receive greatly. That not just Hawaiians, but all of us and things. So because we all share this culture and who we are, and I think it wouldn't have happened. In fact, I know it wouldn't have happened with Hokulea and the beginnings that her brought to us.
And as an added value to that, we talk about a canoe that has all native speakers on it. In our society these days, we have more native Hawaiian lawyers, we have more native Hawaiian doctors, we have more native Hawaiian businessmen.
That's true.
We have hopefully more native Hawaiian policymakers, but it began somewhere.
Yes, it did.
And you can tie the success of the Hawaiian people back to specific places, Hokulea being one of them, therefore Herb Kane being one of them. The brilliance of the Wayfinder comes into play here. And Nainoa and I were talking before about how Herb Kane saw the canoe. Back in 1994, we had an extraordinary experience. Nainoa was on Hokulea. The kids from the public schools were at the University of Hawaii, and Lacey Veach was up in the space shuttle.
Yeah.
And we tied them all together.
That's what he did.
Was a surreal moment. And so I'd like to ask Nainoa to take a look through, you know, Herb Kane as a gentleman who wanted to dispel myths about perhaps Hawaiian migration and such, if you would be so kind. Nainoa?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just honored to be here to share some thoughts of a man that's so crucial to what's happened in the last 36 years. And I just kind of want to take a moment that, you know, just to honor the 76 crew, especially the first crew, Billy and Buffalo and Shorty and John Cruz. And I guess I say that because, I'm up here on the stage, but every one of them have extraordinary stories about Herb. There's 1,000 people. This whole full room has its own story. So I appreciate that question, but it's a deep one because it becomes very personal. That it's similar to the same things that Peter and Billy been through. My grandmother was pure Hawaiian, my father's mother, and she was a great storyteller. And when we were very young, she would sit us down, her grandkids, and in her pune'e, in her wooden house, and talk about her grandfather, who was a great ocean man and a fisherman. And when she talked about those stories, her whole being would come alive. She would sit up in that pune'e, and I don't remember the words, but I remember her eyes. That sense of deep pride about your ohana, about being Hawaiian and being an ocean man. She looked right into you. And she'd sit up and she gave you that love of strength of her family, but then she would change the story and talk about being beaten by her teachers at Kamehameha schools for speaking Hawaiian and dancing hula. And she'd talk about her granduncle who would rub lye on his skin to take the brown off. And that, I was too young to ask the right questions about why you're telling this. But I wasn't too young to feel it. When she talked about the lie, when she talked about the beatings, her whole body would slouch down. Her whole eyes would go to the floor. And that was the first indication. So it wasn't so much about what my grandmother said, it was how she made you feel. That being Hawaiian, a part of it, you should be shamed. And you should be shamed, and you should understand to some degree you're going to step into a society, you ought to be proud of who you are, but you're going to step into a society that doesn't care. And that you're going to step into a society that's going to hold you, because of your color of your skin, to have less expectations of yourself. And the whole pathetic, chronic, debilitating issues that come with feeling inferior. And what happened to me was you saw that in school. And that the shame went to places about not wanting, you're so afraid to fail as a young Hawaiian, because then you would just be living the prophecy that your grandmother and others in your society was expecting. So the best way not to fail is never to try. But to the issue of Herb forced us to shift. He forced us. And what he did was, on my side, again, I was introduced to Herb when there was no hokulea. It wasn't even public. It was such a powerful issue for him, but he was so brilliant, and in the genius of him, give it to a public that's not going to understand. So he was quietly recruiting the top watermen in Hawaii to be crew members for a canoe that wasn't even built, 1974. Now, it wasn't me, by the way. And that was Buffalo. That was what he was really targeting. He lived across the stream from a place where I paddled for Huinala Canoe Club. What he was targeting was our two head coaches. This guy by the name of Billy Mitchell, top paddler from Kamehameha schools. And I would argue in the time with Buffalo, up at the same rank of Buffalo, the top waterman in the state of Hawaii, Kalaku Kea, our two head coaches. Herb invited me to come with them because he had this 22-foot double-hull canoe, 4x4 post, Hobie cat sail, tied him with rope, and he's up across the canal where we paddled from, so he needed volunteers. I love the ocean, banana novice speed paddler. Every time they come over, we get volunteers to paddle outside the reef, because Herb was exercising his dream. I'd come, he asked, I'd go. And so every time he would come, I would go. So to Billy's point, right place at the right time. Lucky. And then it was a late spring evenings. I remember the stars. Herb invites Kala and Billy, top waterman in Hawaii, to come to his house for dinner. He invited me because I guess he just felt sorry because I went with him so many times. Well, better just feed me one time and it'll be good enough. And but this was the personal story that I would share, that I know everybody has their own. when you have the privilege to be next to the genius. When you walk in this old wooden room, there was these 19 oil paintings of voyaging canoes. Remember, my K-12 education had nothing Hawaiian. I had no idea where I came from. I had no idea how my ancestors got here at all. We didn't know the spaceship of our ancestors, but Herb did. And the question is, right, how come nobody in Hawaii saw it except for Herb? How come he saw the canoe? It's part of that thing, is just about his genius. But in that room, he unfolded the dream of the voyage, of the building a voyaging canoe, sailing it down the sea roads of your ancestors, pulling Tahiti out of the sea, bringing pride and dignity back to the canoe, and the ancestors represented that, and giving it to your people. I mean, he saw the whole thing even before the canoe was built. How did he do that? But I never asked him. And the part of the genius of Herb was not that moment, but it was when he went outside and he took our eyes and our imagination up to the stars and these 7,000 dots of light that go over our heads every single night. It's just chaos. Started to make a Hawaiian map of your ancestors, from the North Star to the Eastern Star down to the Southern Cross. And he said, these are the stars that we're going to use to fundamentally find who we are. And when I think about the genius and why he's so extraordinary, many people have dreams, but there are few who fundamentally, ultimately meet their particular dreams, because it's so difficult to do. But rarely, maybe 1 in 6 billion, will you find someone that met his dreams, and gave it to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So on that personal side, I'm only one of those thousands that Herb shifted everything. And in our side, we regard him as, if Hokulea had anything to do with the Renaissance, if Hokulea had anything to do with the rebirth, if Hokulea had anything to do with the transformation of the role of Native Hawaiians in their own homeland, and we see Herb as the father of the canoe, if that's the case, then Herb's father of Renaissance. He's the pico. He's the center. He's a story that you go back to, and it's a story that you don't forget. So that a night like tonight will we come and celebrate him. In my mind, it's very crucially important that that story about Genesis, that story about the rebirth, that story about the re-beginning can never be forgotten. So in many ways, this may be a fundraiser, and it's a successful one, and we should be proud of that. But it's a time when we need to recognize how important it is to not forget, and to make sure that Herb Kavainui Kane, forever, is really father of the canoe, father of Renaissance.
Did you circle back after every successful voyage back to Herb? Did you go back to him when you made it, when Hokulea made it to Tahiti first? And
Well,
then what about Aotearoa, and then the other side of the triangle when you hit Rapa Nui, and then Japan? I mean,
You know, I didn't need to circle back. You had to circle back with me. Herb loves these islands. He loves its history. He loves its Hawaiian people. I've met few people that are so fundamentally driven from way down deep inside, part of the genius, a depth that we should all be lucky to get to. But Herb held high standards. So, 78, I know Herb Kane's anger. I know Herb Kane's bitterness when we failed. Herb was a man that would not allow failure because he understood how much was at risk. Hokulea fails, how many generations need to go by before we forget what Hokulea was being, because it ended up being tragedy. 1980, he comes back and he celebrates. So after every single voyage, we would connect. But let me just say, he had high standards. Sometimes he was always kind of happy we got there, but he wasn't always kind of happy about how we did it. Let me put it that way.
How do you think, Billy? What do you think he'd say about going around the world?
He'd like it.
He like
No, he would. I mean, because I mean, the whole thing about with Hopolea was to promote, or to express the Hawaiianness, you know, and we have what we have to share. So he would enjoy this thing, and in fact, he would want to come along. I think you know, with all of us, you know. But
Yeah.
he would take it.
We're going to wrap up this part of the evening pretty soon, but you know, Peter, you folks were very instrumental in getting the Kamehameha landing to be placed right outside the Monarch Room. Was there a reason for that, the nexus of the Monarch Room and Kamehameha landing? And then the final question for you folks is, what do you see in that painting? And then we'll wrap it up. Okay, Peter?
Oh yeah, well, the painting is a bookend, a second bookend at the other end of the shelf that completes a cycle he created when he first created the Battle of Nuanupali, which many of you have seen, and he had over the years had expressed to me, you know, once in a while that he'd like to complete it by going back to the beginning, working history backwards, and beginning with the invasion of Oahu and the landing here at Waikiki. But you know, Rick, if I might, just real quickly, part of Herb's genius in focusing a lot of his work on voyaging was that he picked the one activity that separated, as in terms of human achievement, Polynesians down through history from the rest of the world. Consider that that's an activity that required exploring 1/3 of the Earth's surface in a moving environment with no sextant, no compass, no stern post rudder, no jib, no keel. Hundreds of years before the Vikings, and we did it. 1/3 of the Earth's world's surface, and that was a stroke of genius, because that is what, when you saw the voyaging canoes and you understood what that was about, and the fact that out of that emerged the first navigator in hundreds of years, was part of Herb's genius. And it's boy, if anything is going to make you stand up and be proud of who you are and what your heritage and where you came from, that did it for me.
Thank you. Closing thoughts.
Well, you know, we've come a long way from 1976. We have. We as a people, as Hawaiians, and then we as a people of Hawaii, I think. So, 1976, we're trying to get Kaho'olawe back. Tonight, we have Admiral Dixit Smith, commander of naval forces here. We learn to understand each other and the things that are important to us as a people, not just as a native people, but as people in general. You know, and we're building bridges. We are understanding who we are. And things. We've come a very long way, all of us, and things. And I think it's good, because, to be honest, I never thought I'd ever stay at the Royal Hawaiian. Okay.
Yeah. All right. There's a victory right there.
Thank you, Herb.
Right. Thank you, Herb.
You know, I'm waiting for the person at the desk to say, "Have you stayed with us before?" And I'm going, "Oh no." But we've all come a long way. We found bridges to each other. You know, we are all important, and that's what's important. We are all important. And as long as we remember that we are important to each other, we are important to who we are, and we are important to what we do, then I think we're on a good path. Things, you know. Right now, what I want to do is I do want to recognize the crew of Āwhaite. We wanted to bring Hokulea and some of the other canoes that are here from Hawaii to stand outside of the Royal. We couldn't. We have everybody's committed. So the crew of Āwhaite brought their canoe, and it's out there and things. So I'd like to recognize them. Captain Teva Lishar, if you please. Yves Dudo. Geriel Amio. And Captain in Training Titoa. And this is what I think. See, because to me, it's actually it was supposed to be this way. We wanted the Hawaiian canoes to be here, but they couldn't be for whatever reason. But they are here. They are here. It's a Tahitian canoe. And the first voyage that Herb envisioned was the voyage to Tahiti. And what better people, what better canoe to be here but the Tahitians.
Leno, can you finish up? Just some final thoughts. We got about a minute or so. I'd like to see that happen. No, please.
Not a word, Ron.
Squishy.
Yeah, thank you, Billy, because I think if we're going to recognize just the voyaging, then Herb was a dreamer for Hokulea, but today there's about 25 voyaging canoes in the Pacific, including 12 different island nations. Collectively, those canoes total in the last 36 years sailed about 500,000 miles on the Pacific Ocean. Could anybody see that? No, but Herb, so we lohe him tonight. I guess the way I feel to close would be the time, the memory that stuck out the most in me, that night that Herb pulls out a scared Hawaiian that was not willing to try and gives him the dream and pulls him into the dream, was being at the right place at the right time. And for me, the single person of, again, thousands, my whole life changed. And I have no idea where I'd be today if it wasn't for Herb. So in the end, it's about children. And so thanks to Herb and thanks to Dion for our young navigators that are preparing to go around the world. Said to me, we want to meet Herb. And we knew he is private, and we knew that he wasn't feeling well. Probably could ask him, but probably the answer would be no. So we asked him, and we took up 16 of our young navigators about 10 months ago. I'm sorry, about a little bit about 11 months ago, about 2 months before we lost Herb, to his house. We were told because of Herb's health, you come at 10 o'clock, but maybe you got to leave at noon. I was rushing out at 5 o'clock to catch a flight. Nobody left. And you had Herb inspiring and kindling and changing lives of generations. I guess that's my point, that in the end, it's about children. In the end, it was about being inspired. In the end, it was about, the thing about Herb, what he did was, he made you believe. Believe in yourself, believe in your people, believe in your ancestry, take the risk. And what Herb did, he stayed with you. You fall down, he picked you up. And to see these young navigators, the difference between us and them, these kids, and I call them kids, they're in their mid-20s. These kids don't have the fear. These Hawaiian kids today, I think testament to change, testament to the genius of Herb. They believe, because they were brought up that way within their families, there are generational shifts of the sense of identity and well-being that is different than in Hawaiian kids today. Not every Hawaiian kid, our job ain't done, but much more than before. And to have Herb bring them into his house, to have Herb keep them there the whole day is, I think, again, to amongst the author and the artist and the journalist and the historian, you had an extraordinarily compassionate and kind man, that in the end he knew that the seeds that he had to plant that would be enduring, Rob, is in the minds and hearts of children. And Herb was extraordinarily successful, maybe more than anybody I know. So that's how I remember him. That's how I want to remember him. And to me, ultimately, his story is about strengthening our children.
All right, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you so much, Nainoa, Billy, Peter. Mahalo. Beautifully done, huh? Unbelievable. Thank you for sharing your memories and insights with us. Mahalo. Now, Peter, Rob, you want to come up? Okay. And Peter, you got to stay with us. Beautifully done. Thank you very, very much. Peter Apo and Robbie Iopa will now present an award to Dion Kane in memory of Herb Kane. Dion, would you come up on stage, please?
Oh, I don't want glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah, where am I? Oh, here we go. Hi, Dion. As co-chairs of the event committee, Peter and I'm Peter, Rob and I,
Stick to the script. Stick to the script.
okay. Rob and I have the honor to present Historic Hawaii Foundation's 2011 Kama'aina of the Year Award to Herb Kauai Nui Kane, represented by his wife, Dion. Should we explain what the award is?
Yeah, right here.
Oh, that's me.
That's you.
Oh, this is me. Okay, Peter, that's my name. All right, first of all, the award is a segment of the sail. This is awesome. The award is a segment of the sail from the Hokulea, signed by the crew and navigators who made the original 1976 voyage. You're welcome. Would you like to say something?
I just want to thank all of you so much for coming. And it's such an honor for me to stand here in Herb's place and receive this beautiful acknowledgement of his life's work. And it was an honor to me to be married to such a man. And I'm a little emotional about it. But anyway, I want to thank you, all three of you, for those beautiful acknowledgements. And you really did, and I know especially, to put out what he has given and the contribution he's made. Since he died, I have been so amazed at the impact he had on the Pacific and the world of, just returning the culture and the pride of the Hawaiian culture and the Pacific as well. So I just want to thank all of you so much. Thank you.
Take some pictures. Yeah. Come take a picture with everybody. Oh, Randy, take a picture, yeah? Why don't we set it up? Randy, you want to set them up? Okay, brother. Yeah, Peter and I use the same glasses. 1.75. Beautiful, thank you. Congratulations to Herb and Dion. Very good. Okay, as Naino mentioned, it's all about the children. We're striking the stage because we're going to prepare for performance by the Kamehameha School's Kapalama Middle School. It'll take a moment to do. So think about the Kamehameha landing. It occurred to me that although it's unfinished, it doesn't look unfinished. I mean, everything Herb did was so detailed, I would never know what he would have added beyond that, except his signature. So symbolically, I guess since it's unfinished, we as the viewers of that painting have to finish it ourselves. So think about what you would add if you had the opportunity to do so. We're going to now be entertained and a special tribute to be made from the Kamehameha schools, the middle school, and it'll be featuring Papa Olimehula and the Na'opio singers. I'm assuming that they're ready for us, so if you would please, with a nice round of applause, please welcome our young people to the stage.